good morning and welcome to Doppler'S Gear Garage. Great to see you on this Saturday morning. Hello, Zach. Great to see you. Chris Alexander. Wasn't sure that I was going to see you this morning. Thank you for the kind words, by the way. Yeah, do me a favor, everybody. Zach is coming from Venice, California. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I am coming from sunny Northern California. Chris, how are things down there in Tennessee? So I have been Adrian Tackman. Hello from Denmark. And hello to... Hello to Denmark. North Georgia. Oh, Chris, how did I get North Georgia? For some reason, I thought you were kind of somewhere near Chattanooga. Raining and cool. All right, Gib Green. Good morning from Georgia. If I could sing, I'd launch into It's Raining in Georgia, right? All right, about 15 minutes south of Chattanooga. Okay, there we go. So what the heck are we going to talk about today? All sorts of great stuff. So I have been in the studio. And first of all, Melissa Doppler, hello. How is Pete's down there? I've been in the studio this past week, and it was an amazing experience. We cut basics for 7 songs, which is an inconceivable amount of work to get done in an inconceivably short period of time. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. Adam, hello, hello, hello. Des Moines, and I take it that is Des Moines, Iowa? That's the Des Moines, Iowa Blues. Will Peter add to these new tracks? That is a great question. And Chris Alexander, ever faithful and always bringing great questions. So let's jump right down into talking about gear. That's awesome. All right. So Chris always sends me these questions via text. It's Friday and I am glad. There's some subcontext there. It's been a crazy week. First of all, David Tedeschi. Good morning. Want to hear about my experience with John. Okay, opening the door there. First of all, great to see you, my dear friend. Hang on, I've been giving... Yeah, everybody, a little bit of a musical greeting. Miguel Nunez. And Jerry Sindahl. All right, greetings all. So, first of all, thank you so much for hanging out. So, to answer... Gosh darn it, David's awesome question. What was my experience like working with John Cuniberti? So first of all, what I would love it if each of you could do is down in the chat. First of all, Christopher Thompson, good morning. Hello, hello, hello. Let me know kind of what you do as you're recording. Are you setting up? If you're recording. If you're not recording, let me know as well. No shame in that. I'm always kind of thinking about what it is that I'm going to be doing in terms of course content. Paul Richard, hello. And one of the things that I'm batting around in my head is kind of a recording for guitarists, because as I've for example, Paul is I would consider a good friend, although I don't necessarily know the date of his birthday. If I did, I would wish him birthday wishes. But the thing is that Paul is a student. He's also somebody that kind of, if you will, as I do things a little bit differently in Doppler world, in that I don't just kind of view my students as kind of like, oh, that's like cha-ching, cha-ching. It's a different thing. There's a different relationship. There's a different dynamic. And so we kind of journey on this thing together, as opposed to like, oh, I'm your teacher, you're going to pay me. And, I'm kind of like, I'm not a quote unquote by the hour kind of guy. That's not my thing. Hello, Mr. Tonic. Gosh darn it, I always forget your first name. Can you please down in the chat, gosh darn it, do that? Hello, Brayden Wilson. Good to see you. Hello, hello, hello. Awesome, awesome. So we are talking about recording. And the thing is, talk about what it is that you do if you're recording, when you're recording, and what your kind of your goals are. Because that, first of all, allows me to take, if you will, the temperature of the room. I'm in the process of working on what is probably going to be a double instrumental and vocal album, full length. So I went back into the studio this past week with John Cuniberti, Darren, gosh darn it. Okay, thank you very much. And I got to commit this to memory. So thank you very much, Darren. DGG, Darren. All right, good, with an I. What's going on, Eric? Great to see you. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, hey, Bruce, what's going on, my man? Douglas Roy. There we go. That's my middle name. Don't wear it out. My mom did plenty of that. Douglas Roy. So working with John Cuniberti is an amazing process on a number of different levels. So again, what I want to do, what I don't like, as I kind of made the analogy, I'm not a kind of by the hour kind of guitar teacher. I feel like I have a much deeper investment than just kind of whatever time I spend with my students, because we're journeying on this thing of life and music together. So because of that, the feeling that we're doing it together, much of what I do is done in this chair, in this room, kind of all by myself. There's an Eric Carmen song in the midst of all of that. And I love that part of kind of being able to do this on my own, but it's analogous to what a lot of us do, where we've got a set of studio monitors and we sit there and we look at the screen and kind of go, all right, when's the magic going to happen? And how do we begin to orchestrate that? And how do we begin to manifest whatever we need to do on the guitar side of the thing, as well as on the computer side of the thing, setting up how many, setting up a grid, setting up, the basic setup in Pro Tools, for example, half a second there. Come on, where are you? Where are you, playback engine? There we go. That's what I want to show you. So let's see if I can share this without tearing down the internet. And I may regret this, but who knows? There we go. So in that little tiny window there's a little pull-down menu that says hardware buffer size. And right now I've got it set at 2,048 samples. But when you're actually recording, you want to bring it down to something like 64 samples. But if you're going to be streaming and kind of doing things that are going to make your computer kind of have a lot of other hits to its processor, you want to, hello, come on, let me get back over here. There we go, back to Cameraville. There we go. You want to, when you're recording, you want a very small buffer so there's next to no latency when you're playing. So what you're hearing and what you're playing are pretty much happening at the same time. When you're going to stream something and just have some playback going a la this, since I'm not actually recording at the same time, I can have that playing and then I just play along and it kind of gets synced because I'm not recording. So that sort of, kind of the first place, nobody really tells you need to do that when you start recording. You just kind of go, wow, this feels really clumsy. And you're like, wow, my playing's terrible. As opposed to you find out it's like, actually, I'm playing to something that actually is late. I'm playing to something that's late because it's delayed. And when you listen back to the thing, you're like, wow, I'm just totally out of time. And one could easily go, wow, I suck. And there's enough of that experience that allows you to kind of go, I need to work on my time, I need to work on my feel. So the first starting place is just kind of going, being really aware of that 64 samples is really kind of the low latency setting such that as you're playing, what's being recorded is in sync with the music and is going to play back, and you're going to feel it with next to no latency between recording it and then listening back and playback. Super, super, super important. And then as you add more and more tracks, you may find that on playback at 64 samples, your computer doesn't like to deliver all the tracks, at which point you do these little fun games, like sometimes take 4 tracks or let's say 8 tracks of rhythm guitars and bounce them to 2 tracks and take those other original 8 tracks offline. Or maybe if you've got drums and a bunch of guitars, you take your drums and bounce them to a stereo track and then take those other drums offline. You make them quote unquote inactive, and this is the way you're kind of able to kind of stay recording at 64 samples, but have those other tracks there, but kind of make the most of your bandwidth of your computer. That's super important. All right, there we go. Mike Mitchell, what's going on, my man? Okay, I'm at 74 quad reverb. Anybody, clean and heavy. That's a great amp, by the way. Since you're wearing a skirt, what is my favorite Skinner riff? Gaines, King, or Rossington? You know, that's a really great question. You know, I'd say it's Gary Rossington, and I would say that is, although I didn't play it note for note, but the solos on That Smell are just kind of, you know, I remember when that album came out, and I remember just hearing that and just kind of going, oh, I just love the feel of that, and just the way those solos are played. So Gary Rossington is probably my guy from Skinner, but obviously, you know, and I dared. Obviously in the wrong key there, but the point being is that slide part is so iconic, and I remember, you know, my first slide going, oh, this is a terrible experience, but they are so good, and just four quad reverbs. Holy cow! Okay, Mark, what's going on, my man? Sunny Seattle. Yeah, no, there's just so much great playing on that song, and just, you know, it was kind of, if you will, that album in particular kind of had a high-tech quality to it, in that the production value was not in any way to slide any of the production value on the earlier albums, but that one in particular had, again, great production value. Getting back to the re-recording and kind of working with Coonberry thing, what I did going into this particular group of sessions, and again, I always want to try and present it from some place that it can benefit you in your journey. The first 2 sets of tracking sessions, first was instrumental with myself, Angeline Saris, Zorro, and Peter Keys from Skinner. The second was adding Caleb Johnson, American Idol winner, amazing vocalist, and that was a whole group of vocal songs versus instrumental songs. In both sets of sessions, we basically tracked to the click and did whatever we wanted to do in the studio. The challenge with that is that if I've got, for example, this little guitar part going, I can't play lead. So if I mute that track, that doesn't mean really anything unlike the way if I play it with. And to be clear, we're talking about tracking sessions where you're just getting your basics. And the way most of us would be inclined to work would, as I mentioned, kind of we start off in our home studios. Some of us will make the journey to take what we do here into a larger studio and add drums to it and then come back to our home studio, which is exactly what I'm doing. Again, many of us, will not make that journey to an external studio. So what we do here has to make sense in terms of the layers that we do it. You want to make sure that you've got, 64 samples, and Pro Tools is kind of the smallest setting. It enables me to kind of play without latency and really kind of develop a vibe, because ultimately we're all looking for a vibe. In working with somebody like John Cuniberti, who produced and engineered Surfing with the Alien, I wanted to bring him in because I knew when I was in a larger studio environment, I wanted somebody who would understand the larger picture of what I'm trying to go for intuitively. He can listen to what I'm doing musically. I can send him the demos. I can speak a language where he understands what I'm going for, and because he's got so much experience both working with Joe Satriani in an instrumental setting and then working with Chickenfoot in a vocal setting, he understands intuitively so much of what I'm trying to get at. Which means that when we walked into that studio situation this time, what I did, unlike the last time, and it's the example of kind of, when you hear what I'm playing juxtaposed to the track, it adds a point of reference. But when you're tracking basics and it's one guitar part and you've been used to hearing all this information and what you play is responsive and reactive to those other things, but you take those other things away, it's very hard for the band in that moment collectively to realize what those things were. So this time around, I flipped the script in that I prepared a bunch of tracks where I cut them to a click. Initially, a bunch of them I cut with Superior Drummer, but then I muted Superior Drummer and scooted things around on the timeline such that rather than playing with the groove of Superior Drummer, they were lined up with the click. And that is Superior Drummer has a bunch of drum performances that are digitized into MIDI, and those MIDI notes trigger drum samples. So it basically gives you the experience of playing with a drummer, but the thing is each drummer is going to feel the snare in a particular place. They're going to feel the hi-hat in a particular place. The kick is almost always, if you will, on the grid of quarter notes or eighth notes, or every so often maybe a 16th note syncopation, 1 EN, a 2 EN, a 3 EN, a 4 EN, just some little thing like that. That said, that different feel of the groove to whatever that drummer was thinking can be a really great way to construct your song parts. But the thing is that when you bring those songs in and play them with a real drummer, the reason you bring in a real drummer is because they're going to play and respond to your music in a particular way. And in so doing, you want somebody that's in the room with you that speaks drums. John Cuniberti is also a drummer. So his experience of just being able to know which mics to place in the right place and get an amazing drum sound, get an amazing bass sound, and just be able to bring in pre-recorded guitar tracks that I knew were exactly the arrangement that I wanted, with the right number of tracks in the right place. It would have been impossible otherwise to record 7 songs in 2 days. And so we were able to get drums and bass on 7 songs in 2 days. And we spent time arranging and kind of massaging parts. And the great thing about John is that he doesn't mince words. If something's not working, he's going to let you know it's not working. Whether that's an arrangement, one of the songs, that song you were just hearing is called Linger. We chopped that down from about 6.5 minutes to about 4.5 minutes. And that there was some rather aggressive slicing and dicing, which is where knowing your arrangements and knowing how the song, the form functions, as we walk through that, it's like, all right, we're going to do this here, we do that here. If you know the roadmap and you know that you're taking pieces of the journey out and it's collapsing, you should still know the roadmap of what's happening there. And that bit of insight means that you're able to track through those sections. So a lot of us, play songs from front to back, but aren't always aware of, like, all right, this is the pre-chorus, this is the chorus, this is the bridge, and how those pieces function together. Simply because, until you walk into the studio and kind of go, oh, what do I call that part? How would I describe that part to another human being? That is where we develop a language and we begin to study that. So Cuniberti was great for hearing an arrangement, kind of going, that's not working. We need to slice and dice. And so he's so masterful, and it was such an amazing experience. $250 or less for the rate. So I presume you're talking about the number of samples. So yeah, way less. And I'm literally down at 64 samples. That's the smallest you can get, and that's just basically the hardware buffer rate, I think it's called. All right. So recording amps versus mics straight in from my pedal board, like my GT1000. What a great sounding device. So one of the interesting things that's happening in the midst of my journey is that I'm experimenting with a number of different things. And what you're hearing... very soon is going to be a direct out sound, but isn't yet. So that's this pair of amps behind me. That is a Lone Star, and that is the 110 California Tweed. And kind of my jam, especially on the rhythm parts, is using a pair of different amps. And as you can see right there, that is a 2-notes Cab M+. And in the bottom of that rack, I'll be adding the other one. Wherever it is floating around here, I'll be putting it in there, and then I'll be using... What's great about the relationship between Boogie and 2-notes is they actually have an actual IR / I think they call them dynamic IRs, dyne IRs, of that actual cabinet, that actual speaker, that actual cabinet, that actual speaker, so I can replicate what I've got going back there digitally. So the ability to bring that into the box is very important. So going direct is ultimately a big part of what I'm going to do. The other piece of this, and I'm gonna do my famous... I'm gonna go off frame and roll something in, hopefully without breaking anything. So what I've got is I've got a new device that's shown up here that is a very, 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 very important piece of gear to me. There are those in the amp community who do not believe in using any sort of reactive load box on your gear. And because those are people that I have a huge amount of respect for, I've been looking for alternate solutions. Here we go. Come on, almost there. There we go. So this little guy, can we see it? Well, I'm going to bring it up on end here. So this guy right here is basically a little 212 isolation booth that rolls around on wheels. And so the great thing about this is that this is going to enable me to have two cabinets hooked up, or I should say two speakers hooked up to those two amps and keep an actual load on those, such that one, I think in general, reactive load boxes are great. But that said, I would, when and where possible, keep an actual speaker load on the amp, so the amp is seeing an actual speaker, and along the path between the amp and the cabinet, interrupt that signal with a box like the Cab M+, that I can then take that signal and then incorporate the digital technology to be able to do that. And in turn, that means I can use my actual amp, sit in the room, turn them up, get them to the sweet spot, then use the speakers that are in there to keep the amp seeing a speaker, and in turn tap that sound and bring that into the DAW. And the great part is being able to kind of use the actual amps and the speakers that are in them, and know that because those same sounds are actually, I should say, those same pieces of gear are inside the Boogie, I'm able to do that. And that's a big deal to me. Or I should say that those Boogie cabinets are inside the 2-notes technology is there. So then I'm able to get everything going directly, and I'm monitoring off the front here. And that, for most of us, whether we're using amps or modeling stuff or whatever, is ultimately what we're getting at, to answer your question, David, is generally, once I can bring it inside the DAW, I don't want the sound happening in the room if I can avoid it. That way I'm not getting any kind of weirdness in the room. All I'm hearing is the mix coming from in front of me. And that's a really important deal. Oh, Ben Tom, good morning to you. Hello, hello, hello. The highlight of my Saturday noontime. Warm the heart. Wow. Thank you. Made my day. Corrado, hello. What's going on, Power? Great to see you, my man. Long time. Hello, 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 hello. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. All right, Line 6 Spider Valve combo. Awesome. DT50, hello. We have a bit of Line 6 going on in the house. HD500X, Helix LT, JTV 69 and a pair of LT2 and LT2 and L3T. Boy, you are. I think I've seen some of that gear list, but I don't know if I've seen all of that gear list. That, you are as line 6'd out as you could possibly get. The DT50, do you have the matching DT50? I don't think the 50 was available as a combo, so that should be the head. Do you have the cabinets as well? I actually have 3 of the DT50 heads and 3 of the cabinets because I'm a lunatic. Awesome, awesome, awesome. What's my take on using AI tools with my DAW? I've tried some isotope that has the declick and deverb and with mixed results. So ironically, there is a company called RipX, and they make a product that enables you to basically separate a mix out into stems. And they just came out with RipX Pro DAW, which I've downloaded the trial, and I'm gonna buy it because they got a Black Friday special going. And the neat thing about that is that you're able to take a 2-track, something that there you say, you buy off of Amazon Music, you download that, you bring it into their RIP vehicle, and then now I believe that you can incorporate their plugin. I guess I haven't done this part, so don't take me at. I'm believing this is one of the things that you can do is use their plugin inside your DAW. I don't know for a fact that that's the case, so don't quote me on that. But what you can do is basically use their RIP tool to separate things out into stem and then bring that into your DAW. But they now have, and it's maybe that it's DAW-like characteristics inside their standalone plugin, which may or may not function as. Actually, I saw that I think the new one has AAX support. So, in any case, not there yet. But the point being is you can take your favorite song, pull it apart into stems, and maybe you want to jam along with the rhythm section in Van Halen or something. It enables you to pull that stuff out. And then they've got AI tools that enable you to kind of shape some of the sounds and fine-tune stuff. I have not yet experimented with all those tools other than ripping stuff apart, which is a huge help to be able to just isolate things and work with that. Every so often there is some artifacting, so that's where the AI tools I think become really helpful. But it is also, as I understand, using AI to actually pull these stems apart, which is pretty flippin' awesome. That is to say, you've got a mix and it pulls apart into separate elements, and then you can bring that into your DAW and isolate those individual elements and play along with them, and if you want to, record on top of them. So I think it is pretty flippin' amazing. That is a serious collection of gear there, by the way. Paul Richard, when recording with mics, is the quality of the XLR cable important? What a great question. Paul and I kind of often go back. I think Paul is sometimes sensitive about what he knows and what he doesn't know. And it's actually really, really helpful for me to remember. And that's why this whole kind of like, I'm toying with the idea of doing a kind of a micro training course, but not so micro, on recording for guitar players. Like, okay, we're going to use, when we open up if nobody told you, hey, by the way, 64 samples as opposed to, 1028, you wouldn't understand why it feels, the latency, and you'd be down in 5 million YouTube videos trying to going, and you would go, oh, I'm not going to be good at this, right? All these things that just because you don't know. And until you know, you don't know. And my kind of being really reminded of that is a big help. So to answer your question, there are bundles of cables that I have here. And I actually have a little label maker. It's actually one of the labels that I actually made on my label maker, because everything gets, if I don't label the Ziploc bags that things are in. So one of the label, it just gets messy really quickly. So one of them is SAD. And those are cables from, I'm going to just say kind of like, Guitar Centers, you kind of needed a cable because you didn't have what you needed. You went down to Guitar Center and you bought the cheapest cable that they had available that day because maybe you needed one with like an XLR, male or female termination to a 1/4 inch balanced termination on the other end. And this is, again, getting in which cable you use where. Great question. Don't use crappy cables. And, you know, the interesting thing is that this is part of what I've been also thinking about doing is at what point, good morning, David Ritchie. Drew, hey, what's going on, my man? At what point can you definitively tell the difference? So I'm going to probably do some things where I just kind of run some test tones, and then I try the two different cables and record them and just kind of go, okay, doing a blind A/B test, can you actually tell the difference? Right? There are two things that we're thinking about. One is sonically, can you hear the difference? And number two, what happens, you know, as a cable starts to break? Things only break when you need them. They don't break when you're like, oh, you know, I got all the time in the world and it's the middle of the day. I could drive down to Guitar Center and buy it if I needed to. No, it only happens in the middle of the night when you're desperately needing to finish something, or you're in the heat of the moment of some great creative moment. You know that moment's going to pass, and all of a sudden you're getting crackle, and so quality gear is very important, because when you look at the longevity of your investment, buying quality cables is great. Great question. It is a deal. Drew Bentley, I always look at my instrumental music as a song, more than a composition, more as a song, more as a composition versus chorus, etc. So this is an interesting thing, is that so that's a song that we recorded the basics for, and if everything goes as planned, Andy Timmons is going to be the special guest on that song, and it's called Atmospheres, with a little at sign, you know, like for, you know, Andy Timmons, A-T, at. And that song, it does not have, traditionally when I write an instrumental song, I think about a verse and a chorus and whatnot, but that one really, I think of it as an A section, a B section, and a C section, because it is much more like a traditional instrumental song. And so that is the A section, you know. I should also say that behind me, there we go, is the trusty Mark VII. And this past week, I, for the first time, was recording direct out of that using the built-in cab clone IR going into Pro Tools, and it was amazing. And the great thing, getting back to Mr. Coonaberry, is when we brought this song in, I had the rhythm guitar parts and the melody guitar parts and the solo guitar parts already tracked. I'm going to replace them all because I want to capture the feel of the way Zorro and Angeline play those parts, and then replay my parts around the nuance of what they bring, rather than they're recording their parts in around the nuance of what I'm doing and going, hey, that's it. I wanted to use my initial performance as if I was playing live in the room, both the rhythms and the melodies and the solos, get their organic response, but also playing to the click as they would interpret the time, and then kind of go back and then retrack basically everything. But the great thing that John said about both the sound and the performances was like, hey, I could have this mixed for an album in 30 minutes. It was like, wow. That for me was the biggest win ever. So the recording direct part of things has gotten exceedingly cool. So I was very excited about that. And, you know, again, the arrangement, knowing how you're referring to things. Traditionally, when I do an instrumental song, I do think about the chorus and the verse and the pre-chorus, but that one really felt much more like a traditional instrumental arrangement where there's an A section. So this kind of was a... It could be a chorus, but it really, again, felt much more like the A section, which in instrumental music kind of is the chorus. Yeah, totally. Awesome. So Chris Alexander. So the great thing about working with Angelina that I just absolutely love is that she... a DT50 combo, there we go. She is a worker. So these sessions in the week, especially preceding it, I'm working pretty much nonstop. And I'll wake up before the sessions and be doing work. I'll come home after the sessions and be doing work. So I work the equivalent of about a 16 to an 18-hour day. She's the kind of musician that she comes back from the session, gets a good night's rest, and gets up the next morning before the session and is back woodshedding and working on her parts. So when she shows up at the session, everything is topped off. We did a rehearsal the day before the first of the 2 days in the studio. And I was really glad we did, because we got a chance to play through again to the tracks. I brought a little mobile Pro Tools rig to the rehearsal, and I did play a little bit, but for the most part I was just kind of being Pro Tools DJ and letting them play to the arrangements and play to the click up in the PA in Soundwave Studios in a rehearsal space in Oakland. And that way they could kind of feel how they were going to respond to one another. And in one of the conversations I had with Zorro, I was talking about, kind of the lead time on getting him tracks and whatnot. He said, honestly, it's not until he hears what Angeline is going to play that he makes a number of his decisions. So what they do together as a unit, because they play so well together, but also Zorro has such an unbelievable groove, and Angeline has such an unbelievable groove, the way they take what's already there and then embellish it. And then being able to come back in and kind of hearing any of the embellishments, any maybe little hits and things that they did that I can then accentuate in my rhythm playing and in the melodies, and enables us to do that. One of the other conversations that happen is that you begin to realize how you interpret things. One of the other education titles that I'm thinking about doing, and I'm always a little bit in a state of flux, so I apologize if I previously said, I'm doing this. But it happens as I kind of figure out where I'm going to nest. But I'm kind of really close to doing 15-minute fundamentals, because the number of students that I have is like, the concept is in 15 minutes you go through the range of things that you want to keep underneath your fingertips and should have just kind of practiced. 5 patterns of the pentatonic up and down the neck, no gaps, second finger root modes, 3-note string modes, note names, triad chords, 7 chords, and the things that you're going to encounter most commonly in the course of making music, and just having 15 minutes every day where you can just run through them at a reasonable tempo. They're all memorized, they're all up to snuff, and every day you're kind of topping off your technique. Getting back to the recording process, being able to integrate what they do and then bring that back here and then sit with this, and then I pull up their tracks and I start to rehearse to them, and I kind of listen to the nuance of how they're playing whatever they're doing. So yes, Angeline and Zorro add a huge amount, and I'm a relatively proficient bass player, but hearing where Angeline takes the bass lines is very important. One of the other things that I had a realization of, as I get back to this title thing, is I want to do what is loosely essential theory and ear training for guitar players, because in many ways, there's a lot of kind of content out there, but how much is actually going? Okay, how much is going to really enable you to have a really clear understanding of what you need to understand? For example, if I play a major chord, the majority of my students who might be out there watching would go, oh, okay, well, if I have just a major chord, that is the first, third, and fifth notes of the major scale. It's the first, third, and fifth of the Lydian scale, and it's the first, third, and fifth of the Mixolydian scale. So if you hear this, that's one of the things it means. It could also mean, it also means, so that is, say, could mean the major scale, could mean the Lydian mode, could mean the Mixolydian. But just hearing this, And knowing what it is and recognizing the sound of a major chord, that means that we can kind of connect the dots between the things that it could be and the things that it is. And then when it's left to interpretation where those other notes are not defined by another instrument, we can make those choices for ourselves. That is to say, if we're just hearing this, we're listening for something. If it never comes, then we have the ability to interpret it whatever way we want. If we go, I've defined the 4, so it can no longer be the Lydian mode. So now it's either major or mixed Lydian. Major, mixed Lydian. But the point being is that as I'm looking at a piece like, 1, 3, 4, 3, 1, 1, 3, 4, 3, 1. Okay, is what's happening there. 1, 3, 4, 5, and then against the root of this 4 chord, that's a 3, 2, 1, 6, flat 7, 5. So understanding that that bass note plays a huge role in the way those melody notes work. One of the conversations I had with Angeline was about kind of where I like and hear movement in the bass line and where I don't like movement in the bass line. So I kind of, but why? That is to say, if I kind of go, so if I follow, I go, and I have that movement in the bass line versus this melody. If the bass line follows with the guitar, like happened on right, sorry. So that's happening. And at one point she kind of went, followed me in the bass. And part of the thing about working with professional musicians is most of the time, let them kind of hear things through, and you give them a minute to find their footing. And then kind of if something's happening movement-wise, you're like, that's too much movement for me hearing against my melody part. Can you stay on the bass note or just embellish around that? Or if you're going to put an embellishment, save it for beat 4. So that way you're not saying, oh, no embellishment, because then you'll just get, which is not what you want, but having the conversation about kind of like the way the melody notes work for me, whether it's an instrumental song or a vocal song, the way I hear the bass note, which is really the left hand, for the melody to make sense, I need that bass note to kind of hang at a certain spot for a certain period of the measure, or else the melody stops making sense. And when you have that conversation with the bass player, it's not about like, hey, I don't like what you're playing. It's about like, hey, this is how I'm hearing melody and the counterpoint of the left hand, if you will, of the piano functioning. And then you're able to have this greater conversation without saying, hey, don't do this or don't do that. That insight is important. That conversation was really important for me to kind of begin to realize, right, this is why if there's too much movement in the left hand, it bothers me, but I didn't know why. Which I'm like, oh, I get it. It's again, that bass note staying stable. When they're playing that song, they're just hitting 1, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 5, and it's not moving around. And later in the song, there is a little bit of movement, but not at the top when he's really setting the tone of that melody. So that was a really important thing for me to become aware of, and one of the great outcomes that happens on a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it's valuable as you're thinking about what's happening with a bass player, being able to, first of all, know what you like, know what you don't like, and know why, and being able to articulate it in a way that you don't miss the opportunity to have the bass player bring the magic that they bring, which is the embellishment, but choosing when and where the embellishment is going to be and having a reason for why that's going to happen enables you to have a better dialogue. Pod XT Live and X3 Live for me still. would love a Helix. What's going on, Braden? You are a faithful. I love that. And lots of pedals from the 60s and 70s. And a pair of power cabs. Holy cow. 76 F12, 1990 thing. What is that from? HG. What? I guess it's an F30N natural HG. Awesome. Okay, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Red Fury Dubstep. Awesome, awesome. Welcome. Brian Bartley, hello again. How you been, man? Doppler dudes and dudettes, good morning to you. Or ask yourself, what would Eddie do? Stainless steel frets, etc. Okay. There we go. Tend to stick with Megami Gold, and very solid and lifetime warranty. So the interesting thing, I am now a Rapco Horizon cable endorser, and I've been very, they were actually kind of the first company that I had a cable relationship with in the 90s, and I still have a couple of my cables from that era. And I've done work with I did a bunch of work with Monster Cable, and for the most part I found that their cables were very reliable and very high end. But ultimately, I'd say that Megami, as Darren with an I pointed out, for many is kind of like, hey, if you're going to walk into your average music store, you really can't go wrong with a Megami cable. And a bunch of them will have Rapco Horizon stuff, which is great. I love their cables. But, there is a lot to be said about, just kind of like the Megami stuff. It's just, and you're going to pay for the brand. The thing that I love about the Rapco Horizon stuff is it is not as expensive as the Megami stuff. And, the other thing, consideration, as long as we're going to go down the cable rabbit trail, is the feel of the cable as it kind of hangs on the stage. If you're going to be playing live, I like the Megami stuff. I didn't like the feel of the way the cable hung on stage. I felt the casing, which is probably part of what does a great job of keeping the cable so quiet and all of that stuff, I didn't like the feel of it, the way it felt dangling behind me. I really love the Rapco Horizon stuff for a range of reasons. It's been extremely reliable, 0 failure rate, and I'm using it everywhere in my signal chain, with the exception, and this is about to be changed, with my XLR cables, where everything I use is either DiMarzio or Megami, and then with the speaker cables, which currently is DiMarzio, but that will be replaced by Rapco Horizon stuff. What about the Steve and Joe tour announced? I saw that. It's amazing. Yes, Mogami Overdrive cable is a game changer. Overdrive. I don't know about that one. Yes, XLR cables matter. Thank you very much. I have a single 12-inch ISO cab that rattles like a truck. It's too noisy. Michael, which one do you have? And can I make a suggestion of finding a big 25 or 50-pound weight from Sports Authority or whatever, and getting like a towel, but only kind of one ply of the towel and putting that weight on top, and see if that solves that problem. Wow, I love that. Not enough space in a single comment to list my gear. Exactly. More. Boss Katana Artist Mark II. Those amps are great. GR55 with GK3. Love that. Paul Richard, thank you with great pleasure. Drew, you're nicing about something. I usually make my own cables out of Megami, Canary, or Belden. There you go. I also like the Megami Gold. Yes, no, they're great. And so the short answer is that the Livewire, if you can avoid buying it, avoid buying it. AB section like jazz tunes. There we go. There we go. I like that melody. Thank you very much. Neutrik ends for me. And yes, the ends actually make a difference. One of the other things that I did at great expense, because me and a soldering gun is a flippin' joke. I think I've talked about these cables. I've got all these amps behind me, and we've talked about the little switcher box that I've got. So these are the, whichever plugs these are, the big fat guys. And I had my amp guy build a bunch of speaker cables, because me and a first of all, if you can have any cable fail anywhere that can potentially do the most harm, it's your speaker cables. And me and a soldering gun it's a hot, stinking mess. So these I had made by my amp guy, and it's really high quality. And this actually may actually be Monster Cable wire, as I recall. And I bought a number of big spools of it, probably on Amazon, and then I bought these guys, I think, on Reverb. And we've commented on what these guys were before, and I forget, but they're really quality connectors. That's before I reconnected with the good folks at Rapco Horizon. Lockog, can you play Slow Down, Old Town Road? I don't know that one. Hate to say that. Sorry about that. I need to get a current wife to encourage my gas as well. My ex-wife was the same. There we go. The older I get, the more often I just buy a cable. There we go. Bentom, same here. My ex-wife called it hoard. My current wife loves it and encourages my gas. There we go. Mine is a fellow gasser. Brian, what's going on, my man? Matt King, hello, hello, hello. Good morning to you. There we go. I was absolutely blown away by the level of talent and professional musicianship Angeline brings to the table. She is absolutely phenomenal, which is why we, amongst other reasons, she's a brilliant performer. But the thing is that if she didn't play bass great, it doesn't matter how great a performer she is, there would be no reason to have her there for me. But she really, and she's a worker, and I just love that. And I frequently tell her that. I'm not familiar with Runway Audio, but I'm sure they're great. Also, Mogami fan. There we go. The Mogami fan club here. Okay, just run a MIDI bass track the way you want it played, and turn down the bassist monitor in the mix, and just smile and nod. Here we go. Okay, good. Bass, not bass. There we go. Okay, good. There we go. A good wife. Oh, that's probably nobody can see that. Would have any. I think that's probably should say wouldn't have any gear if my wife didn't support my habit. She bought me some IK multimedia gear, and I have had good experience with it. Works for GarageBand. Works with GarageBand as well. So yeah, the thing about this process here. Try Divine Noise cables. Thank you, Eric. Hey, what's going on? Good to know. I'm not familiar with Divine Noise, but they sound, well, divine. Okay. So my buddy Chris sent through a couple of great questions, as is always. So let me get back to, so Chris, talking about 90 degree, that's a great question. Isolation by Randell. I'm not familiar with those either. Thank you, Michael. Do I prefer straight or 90 degree cable ends? It's a great question. So if you're using a guitar that's got some sort of kind of face issue like this, where basically using a traditional non-right angle jack sets you up to break not only the cable but the jack on your guitar, that's where I use a right angle cable. The great thing about these particular Rapco Horizon cables is I've had a zero breakage issue with them. And so the thing about, for whatever reason, historically in the past, decades ago, when I tried right angle cables, I found that they seemed to break a little bit faster than, traditional straights, if you will. That has not been the case with the Rapco Horizon stuff, and I've been very, very happy. And again, the profile of that when using a guitar like this or like a Les Paul is preferable, right, where it's kind of on the side. With a Strat, or a Telecaster, it's actually impossible to use this with a traditional Telecaster jack because it's recessed and you can't make a connection point. And then in turn, I'm using a splitter from Layla back there, and having the option of kind of when I want things a little bit more flush with the back of some sort of device, as opposed to sticking out. That's very nice to do. And so, generally speaking these days, I'm preferring to run, although I've got a couple straights, if you will, keeping a straight and a right angle combination is generally my jam these days. Just so you have the option of having one end to be flush. Generally speaking, the end that sits back by an amp, because especially the boogie stuff has a tendency to have a little bit of a ledge kind of separate from where the jack is. That's probably a terrible way of showing that. But basically, the jacks are recessed, so you're kind of having to kind of stick that cable in there versus kind of bringing a straight down from the top here. and I almost always will run it through the, like I'm doing here, run it through the handle. That way, in case that cable gets caught in somebody's stride or whatever, it'll come taut around the handle as opposed to destroy the jack. So I'm always trying to be very careful about that sort of stuff. Okay, a couple of really great questions. Do I, Randall Cab, there we go. Try, that's the funny, so as I was looking at different solutions, I definitely looked at the Randall one. Ironically, at that point, it was kind of before hang on, let me answer this question for myself. I think it was before I started working with Boogie like I am. Let me just take a look. I think it's called the Randall ISO Cab, but they come with vintage 30s quite often. Randall ISO Cab. There we go. That's right. So at that, it was kind of before I kind of reconnected with the folks at Boogie. That's what I'm looking for. And so all the Celestians that came in there were 8-ohm, which is kind of a strange thing for vintage 30, in that with a Marshall, you traditionally want to run your speaker cabinets at 16 ohms, or 4, but generally 16. And I've got a bunch of Marshalls that are gathering some dust here. And then there's a Bogner that is here as well that either wants to be run at 4 or 16, preferably 16, because that's just kind of the way I'd like to run those particular amps. I'm not technical enough to explain why I prefer 16 to 4, but I do. So the idea, the V30 handles rattle. Oh no, take the handles off, or tape them down. That's unfortunate, but it means that you're getting some volume out of that thing. So the neat thing about this guy is that these are kind of recessed kind of amp handles, so they're not going to rattle. And I'm really excited to get this thing into the mix so I can then get basically a silent recording stage going on in here, and all the monitoring's happening back there. It'll make some noise through that thing, but that'll be in the back corner of the room. And I had a very large 4x4 vocal booth that I've now disassembled, and this will enable me to keep an actual load on the speakers and not take any chance of blowing anything up, even though the Mark 7's got a built-in cab clone IR, and that one I don't need to keep a load on it, and I'm not going to. Sounds great recording direct. All right, getting back to these questions. This was a great one because I've been kind of having this question kind of back and forth. Most of the boxes that are coming out these days, they seem to be putting more and more stuff in stomp boxes and not giving you a battery option. But what's really cool is that this little box right back here that you're hearing, and I've got it dialed way, way back. Got all sorts of kind of bloometry going on. So that's running this pair of amps behind me. But that is the Grid Slammer, which basically is Mesa Boogie's Grid Slammer / Tube Screamer. But it's a great sounding pedal, and that's into these basically two amp. There we go. The Lone Star is running in tweed mode, so they're both basically doing a tweed vibe, but they have a really nice Fender style / Boogie style reverb. And I just happened to think, hey, I need to try a dry, because if I turn it off, it's going to be, first of all, insanely loud. So just know that it's going to blow this mic out. But so that, I know that was, I'm sure, blowing things out and sounded probably terrible. But that is basically these two amps in tweed mode with just, when I'm playing with them like that without the grid slammer. Really just a nice organic sound, very natural, all tube kind of vibe going on there. And great for that tweedy kind of Keith Richards-y kind of the great thing about it is, again, I'm probably blowing out the bottom end here. It's not quite as floppy. Doesn't seem to bottom out quite as much as the actual tweets that I've got kind of around here. So that's a help. Bobby Valdez, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Okay, so the deal is, working with this particular box, I set it up with a True Tone, one spot, little kind of AC to just kind of a single guy. And that's kind of my default. I found that it delivers nice, quiet power when just using a single stomp. But as I was reading through the manual of this little guy, I discovered that you can use it via battery power, which is nice. So I have a battery tester, so I can check the voltage of the different batteries. And kind of one of the things that I'm probably going to toy with a little bit is kind of seeing, do I actually really prefer the sound of a battery at 9 volts? Do I like it when it gets down to about 8 volts or 6.5? And I've had a battery kind of get to the lower voltage. In theory, it's not operating at optimal efficiency, and some of the they're up near 2 Rock, the Voodoo Lab stuff gives you the ability to kind of dial back the voltage to your 9 volts, so you can kind of begin to imitate the sound of a pedal that's not giving all 9 volts. That's probably a better place to do that. I have some of those power supplies around here, but the idea is when you're starving the unit for power, it can't be quite as efficient. And my guess is that it probably will not be as clean and a little bit less juicy, but it also won't be, that is to say, the cleans won't be as clean, but the drive may not have as much drive to it as well. I'm very interested to see kind of what the end results are. To answer your question, it has been a conversation I've been having with myself. It's kind of like, generally speaking, when and where possible, I use pedal board power or just some sort of True Tone AC solution for 9 volt power. The other reason that I have stayed away from batteries and is that because at some point, especially if you're in the middle of the recording process, the battery life begins to die out. you can't dial back in the exact spot that might have been kind of maybe at 8 volts that you liked without draining some other 9 volt, or kind of having a bunch of batteries that you kind of just use until, and keep measuring until they get to 8 volts and kind of going, there's the sweet spot, knowing that as that battery drains, you're going to get out of your sweet spot. So the consistency of voltage is more important to me than using the batteries. That said, there are some devices that when you plug in AC power, they start to make some extra noise. Sometimes it's, if you ever had a CE2, the moment you use the Boss Wallwort with us, an old Boss chorus, it would add this hum to the sound, which is pretty much useless because it was annoying. Stefano, what's going on, my man? Great to see you. So all that to say, generally speaking, good isolated power in the True Tone, and that's kind of what's in my pedal board these days is the True Tone. The one spot, I think that's what they call it, but there's a 7 outlet one, I think a 13 one. I've got kind of multiple instances of both, but they're really good about keeping your power isolated and keeping noise to a minimum. But again, some things just are a little bit more sensitive to kind of making noise, and so one of the ways to eliminate that, if you've got a pedal that is particularly prone to just being a little unfriendly, and sometimes it's because they do not have good filtering on the pedal itself, is just if you can run it on a battery, you do so, and you just are on top of changing your batteries. It's a really great question. And it is something I spend a lot of time geeking about. Anybody's got any thoughts on batteries, please share them. Okay. Have I ever used an EQ pedal as a boost? Well, interestingly enough, there is an EQ pedal here that I'm not going to classically use as a boost. I think I showed you guys this last week. Hello. But this is literally kind of a boogie EQ pedal, which is basically the 5-band EQ that is in your traditional Mesa Boogie amp. And I got this on Reverb, and it's in great shape. Let's try not to drop it. But basically, I was on the phone with my guy at Boogie yesterday, and we were able to kind of go through a Mark V schematic and he was able to determine that in at least a Mark V, because that was the schematic he had handy, the EQ happens just before the effects loop. So I'm going to be doing some demo stuff around the Mark VII, and one of the things I'm going to be doing is testing. There's a Mark. Yeah, you can see it. That right there is a Mark IIB. It's got one of the best clean sounds ever, but also you can kind of gain it up. And so it's going to be A being the Mark IIB with the Mark IIB mode inside the third channel of the Mark VII, and kind of going back and forth between the two of them. So since I have the ability to add the 5-band EQ there, that head back there doesn't have a 5-band EQ, but we're going to add this to it, so you can kind of begin to A/B, apples and oranges. So one of the other places that you can use an EQ as a boost, and I did something with the Solo Dallas Storm pedal in the JP2C, was in the same way that you would use a GE7, as you place it in the loop so you can fine-tune post-preamp. It's a great question, Chris. And it's a great amp hack, such that after your tone stack, all your tone shaping, you can do a little bit of additional shaping, because sometimes you'll find, in many amps, you don't have a graphic EQ to further fine-tune the tone. You're just kind of left with the EQ point that's, if you will, at the center of the Q for the treble, mid, and bass controls on your amp. And so the idea is kind of, you can't, although you can kind of cut or add treble, middle, and bass, quite often you don't have the ability to choose where that EQ point is set and how wide, if you will, the hang on a second. Okay, you can choose the frequency, and I'm looking for the Q. There you go. So the idea is the Q. So you set the frequency, and then you choose how much you want to cut or boost it, and then you can choose the cue of how much it affects the frequencies that are close, and as you expand the cue further away from that, such that it enables you to kind of pick a point and then kind of begin to cut or boost around that point, depending on whether you're boosting or cutting. So because of that, using an EQ in the effects loop for a solo boost is a great vehicle. I learned that from my buddy Mike Mong when he was playing in the Freaky Executives. He used a Boss GE7. And what's neat about that pedal is you can choose which frequencies you're going to cut or boost, such that maybe your rhythm tone or your crunch tone, it has the right amount of gain for what you want, and what you want to have your rhythm tone cut is not necessarily the same thing you want to have in your soaring lead tone, right? So, and as it turns out, I actually, the way this pedal's set, something with my input jack there. Looks like it's good there. So the point being is that I've actually got the tone backed off on that pedal because that's frequently what you do with something like a tube screamer or something, where you want, when you comes time to solo, you know, you want that lead tone. What you would do for rhythm is not necessarily what you want for lead, and the ability to kind of manipulate a solo boost by putting a graphic EQ like a GE7, a Boss GE7. Hang on a second, ladies and gentlemen. Watching me pulling GE7 out of my hat. Come here, baby. Where are you? Boss GE7. Come on, where are you? You back over in the rack? Where are you? Gosh darn it. GE7. Come here. Come here, boy. Come on. My GE7 has gone hiding. Got stage camera shy. Where are you, you little sucker? Well, okay. Well, that was a happy accident of what I've got here. All right, so I actually have one of the Solo Dallas pedals. Let me just check with one other spot over here and see if the GE7's hiding over here. No. All right. GE7 has gotten stage camera shy. All right. What we've got here is two different versions of the Solo Dallas replica. Oh, the Bass X. There we go. And the Storm. There we go. So this is the Storm. So this is basically like a Solo Dallas tower. In a pedal, except it's a lot smaller. And so the beauty of this is it enables you to do a couple of different things. The way this works is there's a gain control and there's a boost control. And the boost control, obviously boost level, but as I recall, the boost control is brighter and the gain control is a bassier in terms of as it manipulates the level. And then the limiter allows you to add a little bit of squash to the sound. And it's really nice to be able to shape what's happening inside the framework of that. There's another pedal that's here, gosh darn it. Hang on a second. And there are times that your lead sound that you just want to manipulate stuff a little bit. And this pedal right here, the Cali 76, which is a really great, basically it's an 1176 compressor, and this one is a kind of a double, what do they call this, the stacked edition. So you're basically, I think, running one in series into the other. and it is really a great effect. And I've got it set up for that. Let's see, can I pull that up? Yeah, hang on a second. Let me pull this up. And I will. No, I'm not going to do that. So the ability to choose how you're treating the transient. So one of the things that happened while we were in the studio was at one point John just turned around, John Cuniberti, and fired up what I think is a TG1. It's a Chandler mic pre. And it's the same, I think it may be the EMI edition. So it's basically what was in Abbey Road. And so you would have heard that on Beatles, Pink Floyd, and he literally just turned around, went bing, 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 and brought it online, and it was using on an insert basically on everything, and just hearing the instantaneous change of what that circuit added, and there was just a little bit of transient shaping such that the initial attack of the notes, that bit gets tamed, and that's what's neat about the limiter that's in this pedal is it kind of takes a little bit of the top of that off, and that's also what's great about the Cali 76 is that, and it enables you by manipulating that to choose just to tame the brightness of things a little bit, because the first thing you normally hear is the attack of the pick. Come here. So if you can tame that, because in the midst of playing this note, you got. So if you tame that, I'm going to turn the tone control down a little bit. Let me try that again in different pickup selection. That selection doesn't have a tone control active. That's that. Now I'm going to bring the tone control down. So until I tame in the tone control. It's the equivalent of doing a little bit of what a compressor can do. And just pulls some of the transient attack back. And it's really nice to be able to shape the top end, especially for some notes that can get a little pokey up at the top of the neck, right? Okay. Thank you, David. What a pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, next question here. All right. There we go. Am I planning on self-releasing the upcoming albums or trying to find a label? So the short answer is that I've got a guy. He is one of the managers for a well-known outfit, and he's going to be shopping looking for somebody to find a home. What I'm trying to figure out is kind of, what home I'm looking for. In all honesty, there's this little outfit called Gibson Records. They've got this guitar player named Slash. You might have heard of him. He is kind of Gibson Records' biggest artist, but there's another artist that they've got that has, I think, has done well with them. So that would be kind of a really groovy home. So I'm looking forward to that. So should be pretty cool. And as Bruce pointed out, I'm going to be playing at Worship Musicians Pre-NAMM Hang. I'm going to be doing an instrumental set. I will be playing with tracks. So any of you that are at NAMM, that's the Wednesday night before NAMM. So it sounds like a Christmas thing. It was the Wednesday before NAMM, and all through the house, all that could be heard was Doug and a flying V. All right, Zach, off subject, guitar lessons for beginners. Do you have any application recommendation to study scales, modes, songs? Songster. So the interesting thing is that Songster is seems to be something that I hear people using, and I ask them kind of where you learning this stuff. I have these two kids; they're 12, and I was teaching at the Petrucci camp, and these kids are just insanely like crazy great. I mean, it's just like, to think that two 12-year-old kids play the way these guys do, it's just nuts. Gabriel and Colin, they're just, and they work and they work and they work. So I teach them every week, and I work them hard, and they just are like, yep. So I asked Gabriel, where are you picking stuff up? And he uses Songster. I don't use a third-party thing, but the thing is, what I do is kind of go over different chord progressions. There is a PDF that I put together for the Diatonic Theory and Harmony DVD that is kind of my curriculum that I use. So I use that as a vehicle. And when that DVD came out, I did mention, I think somewhere in the introduction, it's like, hey, by the way, if you're a teacher, this is a good application. So Zach, I am dougdoppler@gmail.com. If you want to shoot me an email, I'll send you the PDF. So how's that? Okay, Sustainiac in the neck position. So here's the interesting thing about the Sustainiac, Mr. Tonic. So the Sustainiac actually only works on the bridge pickup. And so it actually is using the neck pickup to basically recirculate the signal electromagnetically back into the circuit. But regardless, the other thing it's great for is a and that's the octave up. Here's the fundamental. Really just a great... Great way to add a little embellishment. Jarek, what's going on, my man? Great to see you. Sustainiac is now off. Here's the neck pickup, though. Moody. Number 4. Middle position. to me kind of telly. It's a DeMarzu Virtual 2 middle model. Here's the number 2 position. Bridge. What's really neat is just with the sound, doesn't have a huge amount of gain, but you can get a little legato. Going, which usually with this little game, you don't quite have enough glue to make that happen, which is really kind of cool. So I was just kind of messing around this morning before. Kind of interesting to kind of be able to noodle around with relatively low gain. At least for me, usually when I have that little gain, I can't quite kind of get that stuff going on. Steven, what's happening? Pleasure. Thank you. I have a sustainer, and I use an Ebo quite a lot. Just love what you can do with that thing. It is a really fabulous vehicle. And again, I don't have a delay set up right here, but one of my favorite kind of neat. So, yeah. All right. Andy Guitar, what's going on? I also have a Cali 76, but the first edition origin made. It's always on. It is an always on pedal ever since I have it. Do I run mine at 18 volts? I am running this one at 9 volts. And gosh darn it. I'm too stupid to think to run it at 18. And I probably... I just presumed it was a 9-volt pedal. Stupid. Hey, I got a word to the wise. Steve, what's happening? Good morning to you, my friend. Great to see you. And Cece, hello. I'll spend hours bending in tune, preferably. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the... All right, I digress. Yeah, no, I haven't tried running the Cali 76 at 18 volts, but that's probably a really cool idea. What do you notice a big difference between 18 and 9? Gosh darn it. All right, let me focus here. All right. Get a gig rig doubler to power that 9 volt up if you have that option on your power supply. So there is a box here, more headroom for sure. Oh, excellent. So give me just a moment. I gotta grab a box here. Give me just a moment. Just a moment. I'll be back in half a second. Half a second. Half a second. How you doing, Mom? I got it. I'm back. So this is one of the coolest boxes ever. So Chris Alexander, I'm not sure if you're still there, but in the effects loop of said Mark 7, and I think I've talked about this little device before, but this is a box from GigRig, and I have not tried their doubler. Albuquerque, happy Veterans Day. Hello, hello, hello. Yes, hats off, and thank you for the service of any of the vets out there. Thank you very much. This is from the GigRig, and this is called the Underliner. Really, really great device. First of all, this box right here, native MIDI. And so the deal is, and I'll grab you in just a second, Andy Guitar. So this is basically, and it was, and I just haven't had a chance yet to integrate it into my rig. It'll be going in this week. And basically it says attenuator, but really it's just a volume control. You place it in your loop and enables you, most people would be inclined to use it as a boost. And you can select one or the other of these two, or you can have it in bypass mode. And the great thing is you can control it via MIDI. And you can also control which MIDI channel it's on. So the idea is you can also use it, you can incorporate an effects loop via all the great stuff that's here. So let's say you wanted to have your amp solo boost, no tone change, but also delay come on, but you don't have an effects loop switch on and off. Well, the Boogie actually does, but let's say your amp doesn't, like many. And in turn, you can go, okay, well, I want a little bit of extra gain here. Well, what if you wanted to have that same sound, but quieter? That is to say, you want the ability to turn whatever you've got in a loop, in terms of effects, on or off remotely, preferably via MIDI, and in turn have some sort of boost or some sort of cut, and have more than one option. This little guy, that is a giant array of options. There's also another pedal that is going to be integrated in my rig, and this one I may not be able to find so easily from my good friend. There it is. Hey, hey, hey. Lucky me. At the Big Rig, and who also, in case you don't know, that's Daniel of That Pedal Show. But this little guy is the Wetter Box. And this little device here enables you to basically run your, for example, stereo delays and reverbs or mono delays and reverbs in parallel, and then kind of blend with this knob between the two of them, so you can kind of choose what you want. And then you can also kind of individually adjust the gain between each one of the different channels, if you will. And so what that enables you to do is choose, let's say, for example, you want a perfect blend of your delay and your reverb, but maybe you've got a preset where the delay on the preset of whatever device, you pull it off your board and you just want to use it. You don't want to change the preset, you just bring the level down a little bit here, and that changes how hard you're going to drive that output from this box. So this is a really great device for being able to, and for those of you that, again, getting back to this recording principle, and we haven't talked about this yet, and I'm seeing a couple of comments that I will respond to in just a moment. when traditionally recording in the studio, you use the effects that are inside your DAW. And this actually is a conversation that John Cooneyberry and I also had this week about, I'm going to hopefully get a chance to spend some pre-production time talking with him about kind of the choices for the delays and reverbs that they made. And one of the things that, because I'm wanting to understand how I can, as I'm working in pre-production, you can hear I've got some reverb on these amps, and a tube-driven amp reverb is going to sound different than a plug-in, even if it's a plug-in of a tube-driven amp reverb. They're just different. And there's stuff that's happening as that tube is hearing all that goodness in real time. But at the same time, by the time you add drums, bass, and reverbs and delays on other stuff, you're going to be able to hear that? Maybe not. So the question I have for John is when and where when you're working with Joe, when are you deciding when you're adding your delays and your reverbs? And he said more often than not, it happens as they're in the tracking part of the sessions. They kind of add some delay and reverb. They'll make meticulous notes about what they used and where they used it, because it was part of the sound that they were getting in that moment that enables you to evoke that. So we're going to be, as much as we had great results using that guy right there, chances are we're going to spend some time doing some reamping. And so the ability to incorporate some of the amp reverbs is going to be there. I'm going to be basically recording raw DI guitars going into an HV37 Millennia Media and Millennia Music and Media System. It's basically a very expensive DI box for, in this particular case, for guitar. It's basically intended to get you into the DAW with next to no color. And in turn, that's how I get into the DAW, and then we come out of the reamp and we run into the amps, and then we capture that sound. So it means that because I've got a raw DI, I can change my part and edit it a little bit without affecting the tone. And then once I've kind of anything I need to do, maybe I play a little bit ahead, maybe a little bit behind, more often than not a little bit ahead. Fix anything that I need to fix. Well, then I can then run that out into the amp, and I can make subtle modifications as the track develops to that amp tone. And then when I'm recording the amp with a microphone, or increasingly capturing that through some sort of two notes technology using the Cab Amp Plus, then I'm able to bring that back in and make those subtle changes as the course of the track evolves. And I want a little bit more bass, maybe a little bit whatever. So I'm going to be using these two amps here, and then the Mark 7 are going to be kind of my main go-tos for this part of this project now. And everything is going to be happening direct. I am going to be utilizing this lovely box here from the good folks at Mojo Tone. And that's going to be just an integral part of this. Jimmy Jet, you rock. Okay. All right, hang on. Let me back up just a little bit here. And yet, so the gig rig stuff, again, Bobby, is phenomenal. And the other thing is there are two boxes on their way to me from Tech Work Instruments. And that, for those of you that are not Petrucci fanatics, that is Maddie Schifferstein, who is John's tech. And so I'm going to be doing some, I'm going to be augmenting the content that's available for that by shooting some video for that. And I'm really excited. So he has basically a TRS to dual TS box that's coming out. And then actually that box is already out. And then he has an isolation, he has, hang on, let me describe these with the best accuracy I possibly can. Tech Work. And by the way, that's techwork-instruments.com. All right, there we go. All right, so the TRS splitter, that's the box that's out. And basically, that's super valuable. For example, I have the beta number 10. There we go. I have the PBC6X. And if you want to use the main output in stereo, it's actually a TRS jack. So you need to either have some TRS to quarter-inch cable or splitter or something. Well, Maddie has the box that's out right now. That would be a perfect box for doing that. It's going to be one of the ways that I'm going to be using this. He also has an isolator, which basically is a, for example, and when I hooked up these 2 amps, and that's the box that's going to come out next, and it's basically a 1-in, 1-out isolation. So say, for example, you're just running an AB box, and you're running it in, or I should say ABY box. Well, when you're in Y mode, one of the amps or both of them sometimes will buzz, and that actually was exactly the case when I hooked these 2 amps up at one of the Petrucci amps, actually the most recent one. John and Maddie were talking about that they use the mimic inside John's rig to kind of imitate, mimic, if you will, double tracking. So I grabbed this box off of Reverb, and as soon as I hooked up both these amps here, I had no way. Let's see. Let me get rid of this. And if you hear this, that extra buzz versus that was my ability to eliminate to lift the ground on one of the to isolate and lift the ground on one of the amplifiers. And so that is a big deal because your average device, I'm not saying this very well, when you go from mono to stereo, doesn't give you the ability to treat any ground noise that you get. Again, I'm running into this wonderful little Layla splitter after the grid slammer. And again, that buzz right there you go, was basically incessant when just using the mimic. So that's a classic example of being able to utilize something like this isolator one that Maddie's got coming. So you'll see some more content around that. All right. Okie dokie. Ooh, what a great question. What are the drawbacks to using in-ear monitors for creating electric guitar, voice, and YouTube? So there are a lot of advantages to doing that. I basically will go to any lengths to not have something stuck in my ear or over my head if I can possibly avoid it. Because as I'm listening to a guitar in space, being able to respond to that sonically in space. But this is the other thing, I've never said this like this, but when you feel music, you actually physically feel the sound waves hitting your body, especially the louder it gets. So what's very strange is to then put something in your ear that means that what your body is feeling in the room, your ear is hearing a different interpretation of that. And a lot of us use in-ear monitors if, for example, you play at church or whatever. So it's a constant continuum, and it's one of the ways we can get away with having a silent stage, and more bands are doing this. The challenge is not only does your body like to feel the organic nature of the sound moving through the room, your guitar does as well, which is why the Dream Theater guys, they play with in-ear monitors, but John has got some cabinets on the stage, so the guitar is hearing something to respond to. The disconnect that happens when I have something in my ears and over my head is I lose the ability to feel and hear the same information happening at the same time. That just kind of weirds me out. But there are a lot of advantages to being able to do that. So let's just say I'm not going to be using, I'm not going to be talking. Or like I've got over here, I've got a little box that, say I want to, and because I'm not running direct, I actually, if I kind of turn it into direct mode, you will hear, actually, there's a mic open in the room. Sorry. So this kills, nope, that kills everything. So because I'm not running direct, as soon as I go like this, everything should go away. Because that's killing that shotgun microphone there. So the thing is that let's just imagine I didn't want to run direct and I wanted to mic those two amps there. Well, the way I can monitor that and monitor what's happening in Pro Tools is obviously either put on some headphones or put in in-ear monitors. I've got some reasonably, by reasonably priced, I think they were $300. In-ear monitors, and I'm gonna forget the name of the company, but basically it's every Christmas, Westone, there we go. Every Christmas, you'll see Westone appear on Sweetwater's website with some kind of cool discount. And I don't really know that many people that have used the Westone stuff, but I figured I'll give them a whirl, and I was very impressed with the way they sound, and they feel and sound pretty natural, except for the fact that they're never the same as what you're actually hearing in the room, and it's a slightly strange experience for me. I really like the Audio-Technica MH50, I think is the model. It's not grossly expensive, and generally when you start getting into super expensive headphones, sometimes they start to hype certain frequencies, and that's not anything you want to do either. If you're just trying to go, I need to be hearing what is either coming out of my DAW or what's coming out of the microphones on the way to the DAW, right? Or the combination of the two. So when you have headphones that have a tendency to over-accentuate frequencies in an unnatural way, not a good thing. There is also, and I need to test these for latency, this is the PreSonus. I'm a big fan, and I'm now using the Aris E8 Pros, I think is what these are. These came from PreSonus for me to review, and I love them. I've been using the Aris E8s for probably 5 years, and I love them. So this is a slightly upgraded version of them. But these are in the Aris line, and these are their Bluetooth headphones. What I've got to check out is what kind of latency there is by the time it gets converted to Bluetooth, sent along, beamed out to me, what kind of latency there is. But the thing is they sound very similar to those monitors, which is a big win. So I need to test the latency on those before I kind of have my final opinion about all of that. Whoa, okay, there we go. So any guitar, as far as I'm aware, the Cali 76 runs at 9 and 18. Not sure if it takes 12 volts. So 18 increases the headroom, makes the pedal do its job more subtle. It won't kill any dynamics, and it becomes a different pedal when you run it at 18 volts. Very interesting. I really loved and because it's not in line right now, I can't demonstrate what it did, but I really, every so often you'll find tones that work really great for one sound, I should say one song, and for another, the thing that made it sit in the mix when everything's kind of banging away nice and loud, when things got more intimate, there were certain frequencies that stopped working. And that really enabled me to fine-tune some of the songs. Let me see if I can find some of this bit. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. This is not going to have the rest of the band in. And I think when I mute this, you'll hear this. Here's a click, and here we go. All right, in theory, that was playing. So uh, that is just the Boogie Mark 7 going direct. But I found that to kind of get that melody tone to kind of sit the way I needed to sit, I needed to tame it just a little bit. That everything that was making it work in a much louder track, in the intimate track, without going in, because there are times once I start recording stuff, I don't necessarily want to go in and start twisting knobs, because I might want to go back and revisit another song that I've been working on. And I have a tendency to take photos of where things were set, but when and where possible, once I actually start recording stuff, and even if it's just in demo land, I prefer to be able to use the different features on the face of the amp. And so kind of, I got close to the tone, but not quite all the nuance that I wanted. And the Cali 76 allowed me to take some of the top end off a little bit and just tame the sound a little bit and just tighten things up a little bit where I needed things to be a little bit smaller, if you will, and more intimate in the track, where the other songs where there's louder banging around going on, I didn't need to make that happen. And it was great. It was just a kind of a tone shaping tool where I could affect the articulation of the transients, that initial pick attack, but in turn I could also kind of affect, by compressing the sound, how wide the actual notes got in terms of the bassiness of them as well, because by compressing, kind of brings the edges in. It was a very, very powerful tool to be able to use, and enabled me to get something that was very, very nuanced, and being able to control the top end and the bottom. It was very helpful. Big deal. All right, let's see. I look forward to checking. Yeah, so there are 18 volts on the One Spot Pro. I'm 99.9%. Can I see that from here? No, I can't. But I can see it from there. Hang on. And also, the Eddie boost drive is and you've heard me talk about this. Come on. Don't be shy. There we go. That's basically always in there. So let's see here. You got an 18 volt there, guy? Yeah, there's 18 volts in here, so I can definitely do that. So I look forward to trying that out. Great suggestion. Thank you, Andy Guitar. Awesome. So I can almost assure you, Chris, that I'm not going to be trying out the Friedman pedal. One, in terms of worship musician, there's another one of the guys that reviews it that's going to do the review for that. And two, because Friedman is an amp brand and I'm a Boogie endorser, it's probably just going to be one of those things that I'm going to opt to not touch. And I know that kind of is not necessarily, because you've got an IRX, and you I think from what I last heard, you were having a great time with it. I'm sure it's a great box. It's just that the other thing is in this next coming months, I'm really going to be focusing on creating my parts for these albums and also creating some course content. If I try the Decibel 11, first of all, I know they also created, there's some half-point font for you. I know they had power supplies, and I was in touch with those guys a little bit. Oh, okay, there we go. Decibel 11 pedal palette allows you for parallel or series connectivity on the fly for your pedals, along with other cool features. That sounds really neat. Again, where is the Wetter box? Does a bunch of that. So I am excited to kind of get this into the mix of things, because this is going to be important. And I started to talk about this before, but didn't. Most of the time when we hear delay and reverb on a guitar sound, we're hearing our delay going into the reverb, which is actually a really nice thing. In the studio, traditionally, you're going to run those in parallel, so that whatever's happening with the delay, it's just the delay. And whatever's happening with the reverb, it's just the reverb. Initially, that takes a minute to get used to, because we're so used to hearing, you've got your lead tone, you've got your delay in the loop, and then after the loop, you've got your reverb that's in the amp, potentially. So you're running them in series, and when you hear the reverb, you're hearing the reverb respond to the direct signal, as well as the pings of the delay being reverberated. When you're running your delays and your reverbs in parallel, the pings of your delays traditionally are not pinging out, if you will, into your reverb. So there are ways that you could probably do that inside your DAW, so that you can run your direct signal into there and then also run the wet signal of your delay on a separate set. That's actually kind of a crafty idea. You would have to just have a pure wet version of your delays. No. The challenge with that is every so often when running direct signal into those things is I have discovered there's some phasing issues that happens. Not going too far down the rabbit trail. That is to say, when you run your delays and your reverbs in your DAW, you're running them 100% wet. Just pure delay, just pure reverb. Such as you bring up those faders, there's just pure delay and reverb there. And they're not affecting one another. And again, most of the time we're used to hearing our direct signal go into our delay, and the direct signal and the delayed signal go into our reverb. So now we're hearing the direct signal going into the delay and the direct signal going into the reverb, and we're missing the sound of the pings, if you will, the echoes from your delay going into the reverb and creating those trails. So there's probably ways to do that, that you could just take that and create probably just a separate instantiation of the delay and the reverb, or find a way to route it through a bus to do that. But the point being is it's a very different sound, but once you get used to how clear the delays and the reverbs are, you kind of go, ooh, you really like this, and you then start running them in series and you back in a traditional amp rig, especially one that's in mono, and you kind of miss that clarity that you got. Okay. Bobby Valdez. Thanks for that heads up, Darren. Can you get a Fender SRV Fat Texas Tone with a Strat with the Mark 7 for the blues? Absolutely. It's kind of everything that Boogie has ever done, and in particular that you can barely see it, that Mark 2B that's up there, especially for clean Fender blues tone. You're just like, Boogie built a better Fender. It's everything that I love about a Vibrolux Reverb, one of the best Fender clean amps that not a million people know about. It's got a pair of 10-inch speakers. In many ways, it's kind of like a baby super reverb. But it's just an amazing sounding amplifier. And so there is a Mark IIB mode in channel 3 of the Mark 7, as well as a bunch of other sounds that just like, there's really so many different tonal qualities, including kind of classic blues stuff. So I will be doing a range of demos around this amp, including a range of different tones. But yes, and yes. Chris Lewis, my dear friend, not sure if I covered, do you send the guitar signal to an amp as well? So do me a favor, can you clarify that? Because that's obviously, I was talking about something, and you chimed in that moment. Can you clarify, please clarify that for me. Braden, I hope you have an amazing weekend, even though that you're gone. The Mimic, I thought you asked if you tried one quite a while ago. Very cool device. So we had this conversation. It arrived this past week, and I'm also, as you've heard me blabber on at times, I'm going to do a I'm going to do a YouTube video on how to sell gear on Reverb. And the guy that packed this box, with the singular exception of using non-biodegradable peanuts. My phone is elsewhere. I was going to show you the photo. It was the best example of like, here's a guy, amazing communication. The pedal and the original box, we got the original box floating around here. All the original stuff that came with it. This thing is as clean as it was when it was new. Amazing communication. The box, you open it up, they've got a card, they've got a sticker, they've got the invoice. Very professionally packed. Like, this person cared about my end user experience. And it's an amazing thing. It's like, you not only want 5-star feedback on Reverb, but it's also really nice to leave somebody with a great feeling around having bought that new piece of gear. For example, when I bought this pedal, when I was reamp, and I answered that. Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. When I bought this pedal, this thing is basically brand new. And again, it has all the original, and so again, when I get to talking about that in this video, anything that you can do to keep all the original, what I call box candy, and have that on hand in the original box, that means that when I go to sell, if I ever do, or I should say when I'm dead and departed, Melissa goes to sell this box, she'll have all the boxes, the original boxes and the box candy for a bunch of these devices, because that was one of the things that I was looking for. You obviously want it when you're buying it new, but you also, when you're buying it used, to have that. Means that when you need to stow the pedal, if you want to keep it nice and clean and not have it get dusty, then it's groovy. By the way, I'm going to share the one gross thing. First of all, if you ever wonder where a lot of your dust in your studio comes from, and you do your nails, now you know. But if you ever wonder where the dots on your screen come from, just think about the next time you sneeze, and now you'll know. Just saying, kind of gross. You're like, what is this stuff? And you're like, oh, that's disgusting. Don't share your monitor with somebody else. That's all I got to say. Reamping yet. So, so I also got a chance to ask John about reamping. And hang on a second. Can I get to my original reamp? Hang on a second. Yes, and yes. So, first of all, Radio purchased a patent from my buddy John Cuniberti, and they manufacture a great reamp. But I also have one of the original reamps that John gave me, and basically what this device enables you to do, in case you didn't know, is basically I record a raw direct track through this rather expensive Millennium Music and Media Systems preamp straight into Pro Tools. All you'll hear is the sound, the sound of the guitar. And in turn, that comes out of Pro Tools and runs into the reamp, and that goes into the front end of the amplifier. You can mic, or you can use, one of the examples of the 2 Notes Cab Amp Plus, or the Cab Clone IR, which also incorporated some of the technology from the good folks over at 2 Notes. So then, in turn, you can fine-tune the tones of the amplifier, and you could also have the ability without, say, for example, you're using the reverb on the amp. Well, if you recorded the reverb and you make an edit and there's reverb on there, sometimes it gets a little weird because there's a reverb tail that's happening with each note that you play. And when you start moving stuff around, it can get a little weird with reverb on there. And it can get a little weird without anything on there. But when you got a raw DI, you can move things around with basically zero artifacting, because so long as you're not cutting stuff in the middle of a note. And then, the other trick is that I learned is basically as a wave is being drawn inside there's a positive and negative side of the wave. One of the ways to kind of, when you start moving stuff around, to minimize the need sometimes to even have to use a crossfade, so you kind of put this little Band-Aid over the spot where you kind of maybe move something forward in time where you had two things that were playing together. You got a little moment that this note played, and maybe it played a little bit late. You want to scoot it forward. Well, this thing was still playing technically where this one started. So what you can do is that you look for a positive and a negative spot in the wave, and when you find it just crossing the zero mark of that threshold of the positive and the negative part of the wave, that's where you start this guy. And it means that you minimize the need to actually use a crossfade. And as John Cuniberti taught me, is that if there's no wave whatsoever, you don't need to use a crossfade because there's nothing happening sonically, which kind of made sense. The things you learn. But the point being is that taking that raw DI track, I actually, I was in the studio with John and another guitar player, I'm not mentioning their name, and watching them, and I watched them do a little bit of Pro Tools moving, and I kind of realized everybody every so often will move a little something here and there. And sometimes it's not even a matter of what the guitar player played. Maybe the drummer or the bass player did something, and the time moves a little bit in the time, and sometimes you like what happens as something, swells, if you will, in excitement. And so if the guitar is perfectly in time with the click, maybe you decide to kind of have the guitar ebb and flow, or vice versa. The guitar player played something, and maybe you want to reflect just a little baby micro retard, if you will. We kind of get to the end of a phrase. Where you pull the time back, where you just kind of elasticize the time. That's separate from elastic audio. In any case, the ability to then kind of be in the edit window, which, where you're literally kind of taking things and kind of making them better than maybe you were able to perform them in a moment, or you had a performance that felt really good, but there was one little piece of the phrase you're like, I just got a little excited and moved ahead, scooch that puppy back. And again, in the same way I talked about moving one piece forward, when you scooch something back, you want to try and move pieces where there's a little bit of buffer, where you didn't play anything on the back side and the front side, or you grab a section and you kind of compromise, or you take something in the middle of a section and you move it back. And that's especially when I'm kind of adjusting the ends of the waveforms. I'm looking for a place where it kind of went through the positive and the negative cycle, and it's at the zero, it's at detente, if you will, and I will kind of take those on the two things and kind of bring them together, and that generally minimizes the noise of those two parts being played together. I'd recommend you have a look into the manual of the Stack Cali 76 to make sure it takes 18 volts. Otherwise, you could need a new pedal. One, great advice. It doesn't say 9 volts on it, but I will definitely check. The other thing is I need to know that pedal inside and out, because there's enough magic going on in there. I want to know exactly what I'm doing. Robert Lamone, great to see you, my friend. Okay. All right. Good. All right, look, I have a lesson that starts at 11:30, and I should probably get Jimmy Jet. If I didn't say hello, I should probably start getting ready for that. And first of all, thank you so much, everybody that always hangs out and geeks out. So let me, before we jump out of here, let me tell you what some of my plans are. There's a bunch of prep that has happened in terms of a large studio clean. That, as you've seen, is like, oh, let me go grab this, let me go grab that. For the most part, I know where everything is in this room now, which is a big deal. As I go into this recording process, finishing up these tracks, it's going to become even more like that. One of the things that exists, let's see if I can grab my prop. You won't be able to see the top of this. Well, maybe if I make an adjustment, you will. Let me not run into anything and break it. But this little guy right here, there we go. Come on. This little guy right here. This little guy right here. This little guy right here, besides the other cameras that I've got elsewhere. There we go. This little guy right here is my handy dandy top down. Come on. Don't be bashful. There we go. Camera. And so what's neat about this is that when I get this guy hooked up, that's going to be great for little pedal demos. So one of the things, and please do me a favor, give me your feedback, please. Ooh, wow, Bobby, another great use of the wetter box is to run a fuzz and distortion with the overdrive and blend the fuzz underneath with the distortion overdrive, just as you get that raw combined with smoother sound, rather unique. No, I feel you. I'm like, what a great idea. Very clever, my friend. Very clever. Missed that before. Maurice Pringle, hello. You have a great day as well. Tom Cutts, hello. Thank you, my man. Great to see you. Chris Alexander, always a pleasure. So the idea of being able to do this top down, what it means is that we'll potentially, I don't know why I'm putting it under there. It potentially is being able to do that in focus in real time, and then we can kind of be trying out gear. When it comes to the amp and guitar world, I'm going to be increasingly kind of just hanging out in the Boogie and Gibson lane because of the relationship that I'm fortunate enough to have with them, and that's just kind of a respect for the opportunity that I have to work with them and behaving like an artist should behave. That said, there's lots of groovy gear that is showing up here that I want to be able to demonstrate for you guys and kind of do kind of a live, without a net kind of demo and set that up. So first of all, any feedback around that would be great. It's like, that sounds like a great idea. So that way it's not quite as much. Yes, Robert, I would absolutely agree with you, my friend. So the boogie, and that includes the boogie gear as well, and doing some of the cool things I've got. Very exciting for me. Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? After all this talk about the new stuff, I found the packaging. Where did my... I did a... Well, I can show you the old one. Oh, there it is. So if I were a rap artist, this would mean something different. But I got a new grill. Here we go. So my Mark II C Plus that I got came with this grill. And as much as it's very nice, it was not really the look that I wanted for that. So I ordered from Da Ribeira this new wicker grill, and I am so excited to put that on the Mark II C Plus. That actually arrived before. Actually, it arrived the day of the first session in the studio, but I kind of tried to be responsible and go, I've got other things more important than putting the wicker grill on the front of the boogie. But I'm very excited to kind of put this on there. So there's going to be a bunch of stuff of kind of setting up the Mark II C Plus, very rare amplifier, and letting people hear that and kind of go, I don't know, let's hear it, And that, and then the Mark II C Plus channel that's in there, and kind of going back and forth and giving people the opportunity to hear things and ask, ask questions. Can you try this and can you try that? Brett, always great to see you. Thanks so much, my friend. Darren, thank you for joining us. So, in any case, as gear comes out, I have relatively good relationships with a number of manufacturers. So if there's something, hey, like Chris asked about the Friedman box, I'm not going to be grabbing a hold of that, but there is a bunch of stuff that's coming and a bunch of stuff that's already here. And if you're like, hey, do you have this and or can you demo it? I want to increasingly use this moment to do that, so we can kind of talk about cool stuff and techniques and whatnot. So with that said, I wish you all a great Saturday. Thank you so much. Thank you for the pleasure of being able to hang out with you on our Saturday.